Welcome to the Membership Guys podcast. Kick-ass advice and tips for membership site owners.
Well, hello there. Welcome to episode 190 of the Membership Guys podcast. I'm your host, Mike Morrison. This is a place to be for proven practical tips and advice on growing your membership business. Today, we're talking about drip feeding your content. What is it? Should you be doing it? What are the pros and cons? If you've spent much time in the world of memberships, then you probably come across the terms drip feeding or content dripping. If you're not familiar with those terms, essentially what drip feeding is time releasing your content so that it's not all available to someone the minute that they sign up to your site. Rather, it's scheduled for release after they've joined in installments, in increments. So rather than just giving people access to a full content library and the whole archive of everything you've released and then publishing new stuff on a regular basis, rather than doing that, you release a core set of content on a set schedule that is based usually on when that individual member has joined up. So let's say you are drip feeding a course that has 20 modules, then someone who joins in May will receive Module 1 in May, Module 2 in June, Module 3 in July, and so on and so on. You're drip feeding them one piece at a time every month from the date that they've joined. So that schedule is relative to their join date. Then someone who joins up in September, they'll get Module 1 in September, Module 2 in October, Module 3 in November. So it's all tailored and it's all scheduled around the date that somebody joined your site. So why would you use this? Why would you do that rather than just giving people access to everything? Well, this approach to releasing content can be a good way of preventing hit-and-run members who join your site, watch or download all of your content within the first couple of days, and then cancel straight away. And honestly, in a lot of occasions, then have the cheek to ask for a refund. So when you have a membership where, anyone joining has access to absolutely everything you ever released on day one, the risk of those kind of hit-and-run members is certainly much higher. So drip feeding your content essentially prevents that because it stops people from being able to consume all of your content in the first day or two and then disappearing. For monthly memberships, drip feeding is also a way of delivering new content every month and providing that ongoing value in order to get people to stay subscribed for longer. And with the drip feeding method, all of your content can be created in advance. It's not following the typical approach where you create a piece of content, then you release it. Then you create a new thing, then you release that. You've got everything ready from day one, but you stagger the release of it. So you could essentially have a year's worth of content, 2 years worth of content that you're dripping out to people over that period of time without the need to actually create new stuff every single month. Let's say, again, you've got a course that's got 12 modules, you're dripping out one module per month. That's a full year of content for that individual person, but you're not having to actually create the stuff on an ongoing basis. So you know that every member, when they sign up, whether they sign up in January, whether they sign up in June, July, whatever, they'll receive the same content in the third month of their membership. They're following a specific path, and they won't reach the end of receiving the core of your content until 12 months down the line, 2 years down the line, or whatever. So it's a much more automated approach than the more common library all-access style of membership sites where you're adding ongoing content. So it can be more hands-off than the average membership. Now, perhaps the most obvious use for drip feeding is with an online course or some sort of signature program. So if you're running a program that is scheduled to roll out over 8 weeks, then again, it makes sense to drip out your content to your members weekly in order to keep them engaged and moving through the course at a good pace, rather than just give them access to the full course and then saying, okay, you've got 8 weeks to consume this. So this can work really well if you've obviously got a coaching element alongside it, if you want to do recap calls at different stages of that course. Having that fixed schedule as a way of keeping everybody working on the same thing at the same time, that can make for a much more rewarding and a much more effective teaching model than just dropping everyone into a giant pool of content. It keeps everybody on the same page. So using drip feeding for a signature program, for courses, again, it's usually going to yield potentially better results than just leaving people to study at their own pace. So whether it is for a course or whether it's a more traditional membership, again, drip feeding can be a good way of avoiding overwhelm, especially if you've got a wealth of information you've got to get through. If you just throw people into the deep end and expect them to figure it all out for themselves, a lot of those people are going to get overwhelmed. So having that almost rigidity in how you're delivering that content, it ensures that they're not getting lost. It ensures that they have the time to actually consume, digest, and take action on what they're learning, rather than just burning their way through all the information. Because try as we might, we may give people worksheets, we may encourage people to go away and spend a day or two consuming or thinking on what you just taught them. But a lot of people, if you give them access to every lesson in a course, they're going to sit down, they're going to watch the entire thing, and then they're going to say to themselves, well, I'll do the action steps later. I'll work through the workbook later. And of course, it doesn't happen. So again, it just make for a more cohesive learning experience too. And speaking purely commercially, using drip feeding also enables you to time the release of content in line with payments that people are making. So, again, if it's a monthly membership and you're releasing one module per month, then basically if someone wants to get the next thing, that next part isn't getting delivered until after their second payment has been received. So again, that just increases the potential customer lifetime value for you, and also make sure that you're not giving away 2 months worth of content for just 1 month's payment, and so on. So various different angles to that. So how does it actually work? How does drip feeding work? There's two main ways that you drip feed your content. The most typical is to base it on time since registration. So this is the scenario we've been talking about, where the scheduling of that content that's been released is specific to each individual user's join date. So every user goes through the same path, they just go through it at different times of the year, but they go through at the same pace, they go through the same release schedule, but it's a very individual thing for that person. The other method of drip feeding is based on releasing at a fixed date for everybody, regardless of their individual join date. So this could be that you're running a course or a program within your membership, and you want everybody to start that course on December 1st. Maybe you are actually delivering some personal instruction and you need to work around your schedule for things like Q&A calls or whatever. So, you want everyone to start on the same date, but maybe you open the doors for people to enroll for a month before that date. Now, rather than actually scheduling the release of content based on that join date, where someone who joins at the beginning of the month gets the next module earlier than someone who joined at the end of the month, you basically have it so that the dripping is fixed. It is very much specific to when that first piece of content is actually released. And again, this can be completely automated so that the content itself is automated, and then you just drop in with any sort of live elements as well. So members all receive exactly the same content on exactly the same day, regardless of whether or not they've joined at different times. Now, where this can work really well is if you have a membership that is comprised of a signature program or a challenge or a course, as well as a library that everyone has access to. You might have this hybrid model where people pay their monthly subscription, they get access to the library, and then twice a year you run a challenge or you run an 8-week program that uses content dripping in order to keep people on track and all that sort of stuff. Now, with that, you obviously wouldn't schedule the drip feeding according to individual members' join dates. You would schedule it according to a fixed start date. So how you actually execute this on a technical front will very much depend on your membership plugin. As with everything, different membership plugins do things different ways. Not every membership plugin is actually capable of content dripping either. So if this is something you like to do, make sure that you choose a plugin that actually allows for it. So when would you not drip feed? We've obviously talked about some big benefits, the ability to keep everyone on the same track, the ability for you to essentially prolong subscription lengths in order to get more money from members, basically increase your customer lifetime value. It's a big part of the reason why people like to drip feed their content. But what are the downsides? Why would you not do it? Well, drip feeding definitely has its benefits. It can be great for aiding retention, engagement, but it's certainly not ideal for every site. You'll notice that quite a lot of what we talked about when we're talking about the context and the situations where you'd use drip feeding has centered around having some sort of course or program or challenge or something like that. If you don't have that kind of thing in your membership, then drip feeding is probably going to be ineffective. It just doesn't make sense. If your membership is more about giving people access to a wider library of material where people are going to want to pick and choose certain things or work at their own pace, trying to shoehorn drip feeding into your membership purely for commercial reasons just isn't going to make sense and actually could backfire because people are going to get frustrated because it clearly won't make sense to them why they aren't getting everything at once. So some people don't like being made to wait. Some people are impatient. So yeah, there's certainly scenarios in which it absolutely doesn't make sense. And that's not to say that if you are offering a course or a signature program, then drip feeding is perfect. Because again, some people are impatient. Some people have more time in their hand than others, and actually they would be perfectly able to work through the course. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to make less money from them. It doesn't mean they're going to get less value and less actual takeaways from the course. It just means they work at a different pace. And particularly if you have a course where it's an upfront cost, so where someone pays once to get access to it, there's no recurring element to it. Or maybe they paid a joining fee and then they're paying a smaller ongoing fee for continued access to a library. With those sorts of things, there's not even a commercial justification for drip feeding because you're getting all that money from day one anyway if it's a one-off payment. So why make people wait? Why stand in their way? You need to strike that balance between using drip feeding in a way that helps your members and helps your students without it becoming something where you're just deliberately obstructing them from making progress purely because it means you'll be able to squeeze a few extra monthly payments out of them. So library type sites that consist of a lot of different courses or regular ongoing content usually aren't the best fit for drip feeding, and especially where you have a community as well. You know, if you want people to be discussing the content as well, it can get a little bit muddled if everyone's at a different point within the membership and if everyone's got access to different degrees of content. So for our own membership, Membersite Academy, we chose not to use drip feeding, and instead we regularly release new content. With our site, members are all at different stages of their journey, so they all have very different needs. So for us, providing a library of content and courses just made more sense. So members can jump in wherever they are, they can make use of what they need when they need it. There wasn't really any logic in trying to force feed some sort of drip feeding. And, you know, even though we do have a signature program, we have the membership roadmap that is very much a linear thing. Again, people come in at different stages. The roadmap, step one, essentially caters towards people who are just in the ideas phase, who are maybe throwing around 2 or 3 different concepts, or they don't even have a clear idea of what they want to do. And that goes all the way through from fleshing out the idea, planning what the membership will actually be, content strategy, structure, then piecing together the tech and the launch strategy and doing the launch and getting the marketing done. So it's a long journey. And a lot of people who join who are still in those beginning stages, they're not all the way at the beginning. Some people have got their idea and they're jumping in at the tech stage. Some people have got the membership built and they're just gearing up towards the launch. So if we made those people sit through the first 8 stages of the membership roadmap that essentially covers ground they've already taken care of, they're not going to be happy. So for us, it just didn't make sense. So you need to consider that whole member journey. You need to consider what results are people expecting, and does drip feeding make sense in actually helping people achieve those results? I mean, ultimately, with memberships where you have ongoing payments, if you want people to pay you on an ongoing basis, you need to deliver something of value on an ongoing basis. So you need to be providing new content. You need to be delivering results, whether that is via fresh content or whether it's via drip feeding. It's more about that bigger picture and figuring out what actually makes sense in terms of what your members are getting. So a kind of little rundown of some pros and cons. So content dripping absolutely minimizes hit and run members, where someone joins, consumes everything, and then cancels their subscription. It can increase average subscription length because it keeps people needing to be engaged essentially with your membership for longer in order to make their way through the content. That's a bit of a double-edged sword. Now, deciding to drip feed your content actually means you could potentially launch your membership site earlier. So if you know that you intend to release one module at a time of a signature program or a course, then effectively you could launch your membership site once you just have that first module done in advance. And then you just keep creating that program as you go. So rather than having to create a whole library of stuff or flesh out enough stuff in your content library to cover enough bases and to make people feel they're getting value for money, you can just create one single module of a course, launch, and then spend that first month creating module 2, and then the second month you create module 3, and so on and so on and so on. So it's almost just in time content creation the first time you do it, but then of course once that content is created, it's then loaded into your drip feeding schedule and you don't need to worry about it ever again. So again, content dripping, making that decision from the get-go means you could execute sooner. It can also, as we mentioned before, help you prevent overwhelm. So releasing that content on a periodic basis, it can prevent information overload, which can scare some members away. It also helps you to set member expectations because you can actually tell people this is specifically what to expect and when to expect it. And of course, they're going to feel like they're in a fresh membership, that they're in a membership where they're getting ongoing value. It's constantly being updated with content because they're getting something new to them. It's new to them. It doesn't have to be new to your website to be new to them. So they're getting something new to them every single month. So in a nutshell, those are the pros of content dripping. The cons is that it certainly doesn't account for different learning curves and different learning styles and paces. Different people have a totally different approach to how they learn. Totally different learning curves. So some members are not going to like that you're forcing them to learn at your dictated pace, and they would much rather have everything in advance. It can also impede progress. So again, we talked about that before. If you start prioritizing commercial gain over actually helping people get a result, then you're swinging too far in the wrong direction. If you're standing in people's way just to drag your course out, that can be a slippery slope. And it could be argued that by choosing to drip feed your content, you're focusing on the wrong people. So many people, we mentioned before, they drip feed their content purely to avoid the hit and run scammers. The people they're worried are going to join the site, download everything, and then ask for a refund or just cancel their membership. But if you decide to drip feed your content mainly because of those people, then number one, it's probably overkill. And number two, it means your priorities are a little bit skewed because you're focusing on the people you don't want instead of actually serving the good people. And those good people are going to be 99% of your member base. So, if you're impeding the progress of the 99% in order to shut out the 1%, that is completely the wrong approach. There's other ways of dealing with their hit and run member problem. And to be honest, in most memberships, those hit and run members are nowhere near as big a problem as we fear that they're going to be. So again, you have to really think about what is your reason for doing this, and are you doing it for the wrong reason? Ultimately, when it comes to whether or not to drip feed your content, there isn't really a correct answer. There is no one-size-fits-all for every membership. A lot of the things we've talked about today make it clear that there are some very, very positive ways of using drip feeding, but at the same time, it can also be a very negative thing. It's also something that can be misused and abused purely as a tactic to keep people on the hook for longer and to delay them actually getting the value. So it certainly comes down to personal preference. It comes down to what you feel is going to be the best way of serving your members. And hopefully some of the pros and cons and the various different angles and perspectives on the whole notion of drifting your content that we talked about in today's episode, hopefully that's all helped you to get a clearer idea of whether it's something that would be right for your membership. That's it from me for this week. Hopefully you found it useful. I'll be back again next week with another installment of the Membership Guys podcast. If you've enjoyed today's episode of the Membership Guys podcast, we invite you to check out the membersiteacademy.com. The Member Site Academy is the essential resource for anyone at any stage of starting, growing, and running a membership website. So whether you're still figuring out what your idea is going to be, or whether your website is already up and running and you're just looking for ways to grow it and attract new members, then the Member Site Academy can help you to get to the next level. With our extensive course library, monthly training, exclusive member-only discounts, perks and tools, and a supportive, active community to help you along the way with feedback, encouragement and advice, the Member Site Academy is the perfect place to be for anyone looking to start, manage and grow a successful membership website. So check it out at membersiteacademy.com.